from Washington, D.C. I'm Max Grunig from the Ecologic Institute, a nonprofit focusing on environmental and sustainability policy making in the United States and Europe. We have here today a POCACITO webinar, part of our Post-Carbon Cities of Tomorrow program, which focuses on urban sustainability in the United States, in Europe, and beyond. We've had this year studies or visits to cities in the United States. We went to have workshops in Houston, Denver, Las Vegas, Minneapolis, Memphis, and Detroit. And some of these participants are possibly on the call here today. We also took people this year with the POCACITO program from the United States to Germany. We went to Hamburg and Essen and Bottrop, and are going back again also next year again. So if you're interested, please have a look at our website. It's POCACITO.org. And we also have other activities as part of the POCACITO programming, including research and communication activities in Europe, where we have over 10 case study cities, pilot cities in Europe, 2 pilot cities in China, and 1 in Brazil. So it's a very broad programming. Today here we're very excited to have a special webinar with Professor Sabine O'Hara, who is the Dean and Coordinator of land grant programs for the College of Agriculture, Urban Sustainability, and Environmental Science at the University of the District of Columbia, UDC. She is responsible for academic research and community outreach programs, and is leading UDC's efforts to building a cutting-edge model for urban agriculture. And that's also the topic of today, and why she's here today, to present on urban food hubs and rethinking the food security in urban environments. I won't go into the details of what this actually means, food hubs, and how food hubs and urban agriculture link and contribute to food security. I leave that to you, Sabine. Thank you for being here with us today, and welcome to the POCACITO webinar. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Max. Thank you for the kind introduction, and thank you all who are linked into the webinar for your interest in urban agriculture. As Max said, I'm the Dean of the College of Agriculture, Urban Sustainability, and Environmental Sciences, and we are a land-grant university that is a group of universities, public universities in the United States, who are charged with a dual mission of offering academic programs, but also very intentionally offering programs that really make a difference in the regions where these universities are located and are serving their communities. So let me see if my slideshow works here. Okay, so this is our mission, and you can see that it refers to this idea of research-based academic but also community outreach programs that improve the quality of life and economic opportunity. Now, our territory, if you will, as a land-grant university is the District of Columbia, which is a city-state, so to speak. There are several in Germany, those of you who are maybe familiar with Hamburg or Bremen or Berlin. And here in the United States, we have Washington, D.C., which is a city-state, which also makes us the only land-grant university in the United States whose territory is exclusively urban. So we are not the kind of land-grant university that you would find like Ohio State or University of California in Davis or Cornell in New York, whose focus historically has been agriculture and capacity building in agriculture mostly rural focused. Our focus is exclusively urban because the District of Columbia doesn't have any rural territory. So why is food and this idea of urban agriculture so important? Well, many of our cities, and I've put some statistics up here from Washington, D.C., many of our cities are intensely bifurcated. That means they have parts of the city, neighborhoods within the city that are very well-to-do and that have very easy access to services, including access to fresh, unprocessed food. Other areas, not so. Now, for those of you who are not from outside of the United States, this may be a little bit different than what you're used to. But here in the United States, we actually speak of food desert neighborhoods. Food desert neighborhoods means these are neighborhoods where there is no full-service grocery store, no market, no access to fresh food. People get their food from the gas station or from a corner store where food means potato chips and other highly processed foods, but no access to fresh food. And here in Washington, D.C., in the nation's capital, we actually have 8 census tracts that are qualified as food deserts. They don't have a grocery store, full-service grocery store, or access to fresh food within about a mile radius from the neighborhood. And this mile radius is the definition that the USDA offers for what constitutes a food desert neighborhood. Unfortunately, as often is the case in our bifurcated cities, this lack of access to fresh food is strongly correlated with income and with race. Our lowest income neighborhoods here in Washington, D.C. are located in Ward 8, south and east of the river, where the median income is $32,000. The African and African American populations are 90%. Ward 3 has a median income of $110,000, and this is census data from 2010, and 5% African Americans. Unemployment correlates in a very similar manner. 24% unemployment in our underserved wards. When we took a survey of food retailers, 520 actually self-identify as food retailers, but these retailers do not offer fresh food. 88% of them admit on a follow-up question to not actually having any fresh food in their stores. And so it's not surprising when you look at the spatial distribution of these food desert neighborhoods and this lack of access to fresh food, that they are located in Ward 8, but also in Ward 7 and 5, which are 2 other wards that are low income. And so you have 32% of the population located in these low-income neighborhoods, Ward 8, Ward 7, and Ward 5, but these same neighborhoods only have 9% of the grocery stores. So this is why we focused on urban agriculture, is that we've got to do something to address this problem, because, of course, there are huge implications from this disparity, where our food-related illnesses, obesity, hypertension, diabetes, are very high in these neighborhoods where there is such a lack of access to fresh, unprocessed food. So we set out to change that and to actually build what we're calling our urban food hubs in these neighborhoods where there is such a lack of fresh food, of access to fresh food. But we also learned very quickly that residents who have lived in food desert neighborhoods for a very long time, who have very limited access to open space, where the art of gardening has all but died out, that those residents aren't going to wake up in the morning and say, okay, let me figure out how to grow some of my own food. Instead, we had to take a more comprehensive look at this food desert problem. Most residents who live in food desert neighborhoods don't come to this idea of increasing access to fresh food because they want to grow food. But the initial contact is very often a concern for health. I may have a child who is only 12 years old and she already has a blood sugar level of 250. And, you know, the family realizes that this has to do with the eating habits and some change is necessary. But there is little access to information on how this might happen. So we realized very quickly that in order for us to actually succeed in improving health in these neighborhoods, we would have to take a very comprehensive look at the food system. And so what we define as an urban food hub consists of 4 components. It's about producing the food. It's about preparing the food. It's about food distribution. And it is about waste and water recovery. Because when you produce food in an urban environment, in the midst of people and on top of people, you really need to do things differently than if you practice in a less densely populated rural community where you can use more conventional methods of agriculture. So what does it look like? What do these 4 components then actually look like in our neighborhoods? So the food production component, we have a research farm, and that research farm serves the sole purpose of advancing knowledge and application in urban agriculture. So the question we constantly raise is, how can you grow a lot of food from very small spaces? And how can you grow it in spaces that are not necessarily conducive to food production? You may have soil contamination issues. How can you do it then? Or if you have a lack of natural light, how can you still produce food and maximize the benefits of nature in terms of photosynthesis that is absolutely imperative if you want to grow food? So we use bio-intensive methods. Oftentimes we grow in raised beds with a lot of compost, but we also use production methods that don't use soil at all, such as hydroponics and aquaponics. Hydroponics means you actually grow vegetables in nutrient-rich water, and aquaponics means your source of fertilizer comes from fish tanks. So the fish excrement becomes fertilizer for the plants. The water from the fish tanks flows through your plant beds. The plants take up the nutrients, filter them out, and the water runs back into the fish tanks. But we also, in areas where we have no space on the ground, we may use a rooftop. So we have a 20,000 square foot green roof on one of our buildings. We're experimenting with green walls. Sometimes the growing season can be extended by using hoop houses. And then there is the idea of indoor farming, where you then would use LED lights to replace photosynthesis through your natural lighting. These production facilities, then this is another interesting question: who owns them? So they can be cooperatively owned by nonprofits. They can, of course, be privately owned and operated. In our case, we made an investment as a university to actually raise funds to pay for the upfront capital investment that is necessary to actually implement some of these production methods. So let me get into a little bit more detail of what the food production component might look like. So here you see some pictures of hydroponic systems growing food in gutters. These are microgreens, and you see lettuce in these pipe systems, and the nutrient-rich water flows through these. Actually, the gutters at the top, that's an interesting combination. There's actually soil in the gutters. You can do it just with the nutrient-rich water as in hydroponics, but in this case, we actually fertigate. That means we use the nutrient-rich water from the fish tanks to fertilize and irrigate soil growing environment. And then you see the fish tanks from one of our aquaponics systems. These are some pictures of our food-producing green roof. It's a combination of plant systems that we have on the roof. You'll see some sedums there. These colorful plants. They are native to the area and they're very low maintenance. And so this is a demonstration of how you can use a green roof to simply help climatize your building, lower your heating and air conditioning expenses by sort of blanketing the building. But then you also see some of our squashes, and we've had all kinds of things growing in these planters. This is a retrofitted roof, so weight-bearing issues were a challenge in terms of the design of the roof. So most of the weight sits on the foundation along the perimeter of the roof, and there we can support 18 inches of soil, which would even support small fruit trees, but certainly tomatoes, peppers, okra, eggplant, all kinds of squash varieties, beans. A lot of vegetable plants, of course, like to climb, and so we put trellises around the perimeter of the roof to encourage the plants in that way. At the far end of the roof, you see our pollinator garden. You're going to have to think about if you have a roof environment that is, this one is 6 stories above the street level, and so you have to think about where do your pollinators come from. We had actually planned on, if necessary, putting beehives up there, but it wasn't necessary because the pollinators found us very quickly, even this high above the cityscape. Now, the food preparation component, there is also a commercial opportunity, just like there is a commercial opportunity in the food production, namely value added, turning the peppers and the tomatoes into salsa, pickles, canned goods, and so forth. But food preparation for us also means cooking classes, nutrition education. And then for those folks who are interested in maybe in the more entrepreneurial aspects of the food preparation, we also offer food safety and sanitation classes. And you see some of our pictures here of cooking classes. We also do a lot of nutrition education in schools, and we then expand that to include the caregivers of the children, because sometimes when the children really like what they taste in terms of fresh food, they then bring that home and say, I want some carrots or some yellow squash, and the household may not be familiar with how to prepare it. So we do a lot of nutrition education also in schools, in community centers, and at farmers markets, where we would offer recipe sheets and food tastings to encourage people to use produce that is in season. This is some examples of what we mean by food distribution. So certainly food can be sold in grocery stores. That's what we're used to. And we really encourage our urban producers to link up with grocery stores and also with niche restaurants to supply them with freshly grown produce grown in the District of Columbia. Farmers markets, of course, is another outlet, but we also have a food truck. And so in some cases, we take the produce into food desert neighborhoods, but then we also teach nutrition education from the truck or even cooking classes. And we run a CSA here on our campus that stands for Community Supported Agriculture, which means people are actually buying a share of weekly deliveries of produce over the term of the growing season. Our deliveries here are from mid-May until the first week in December. So we just closed up our CSA for the season. We do have a specialization in ethnic crops. That is USDA speak for crops that are not native to the Americas. And here in the DC metro area, there is a very robust market for African crops particularly, but also for Asian crops. And so we have pioneered some of these crops and have acquired the knowledge on how to grow them, and we pass that on to our urban food producers. And this then offers nice opportunities for contractual agreements with ethnic restaurants and with grocery stores that also specialize in ethnic foods. This food distribution issue is a bit of a conundrum, because if you are a producer, then you would produce things that have a very high price point. For example, microgreens, or some herbs, or edible flowers, which fetch even a higher price than some of the microgreens that high-end restaurants like, because they make a nice plate and they are tasty. They're also very high in nutrients. But despite their high nutrient content, they are not sufficient to address the lack of access to fresh food that we have in our food desert neighborhoods. In those neighborhoods, you would need to grow a much wider variety of produce, but your price point also needs to be much lower. And so we really need to do a lot more work in this area of food distribution and what works, what kind of a business model works. Does it have to be a mix of high-end and subsidized produce? But we're also always looking for new ways of getting fresh produce to low-income neighborhoods. My argument as an ag economist and an agricultural economist and environmental economist would be that certainly urban agriculture can address some significant negative externalities, like health problems, but also increased employment through entrepreneurship in the food sector, but also reducing transportation of food from our rural areas to the urban areas where the majority of us live. And so as we address these negative externalities and reduce the negative impacts they create, there should then be some kind of a compensatory mechanism to support these urban food producers and food processors. Last but not least, there is a very robust market and opportunity for closing the loop, waste and water recovery. So enhancing soil, which is very much needed in urban environments where sometimes soil quality is an issue. Lead typically tends to be an issue. Here in the District of Columbia, we also have some areas where arsenic is very high in our soils. So soil enhancements or improving the quality of the soil is an important part of our mission. This, of course, also reduces the waste stream of organic waste if we can recover that and compost it. But then there's a whole area of water management issues. As we increase permeable surfaces in cities by installing community gardens, planting rooftops, plants absorb water. And so actually there is a meaningful contribution that urban agriculture can make to reducing stormwater runoff and to mitigating flooding in some of our neighborhoods where typically the water just shoots off the roof or shoots off the top of the blacktop and really creates a stormwater management problem. In order to really be more conscious about water use, we also harvest a lot of rainwater. We use drip irrigation rather than surface irrigation to reduce the water loss from evaporation. So we're always looking for ways to increase water reuse and water management, but also energy is one of our focal points, namely either how can we generate energy from our system through biodigesters, for example, but also how can we make sure that our systems are low in terms of energy use. So wherever possible, we would, for example, use natural lighting rather than artificial lighting to reduce the energy draw of our aquaponics or hydroponic systems, for example. So here are some pictures of where we're actually building these urban food hubs. Ward 3 is definitely not a food desert neighborhood, but it is where our main campus is located. And so the main campus on Van Ness, which is at the corner of Van Ness and Connecticut Avenue in DC, is turning into an urban food hub. We have a hydroponic system on the roof, a greenhouse. We do rainwater harvesting. You see the green roof, and the plaza below is also a green roof. The pavers are permeable, and we're capturing the water runoff from the plaza into some big cisterns, and come spring, those systems will be connected to the irrigation system for the plaza. This is another location in Ward 5, more of a food desert neighborhood until very recently when a grocery store opened there. So here we have 3 big greenhouses, actually a hydroponic system, an aquaponic system, and a native plant nursery. So now we're moving into not agriculture, strictly speaking, but horticulture, namely growing plants for parks and recreation. Here in the district, one of the methods to eradicate invasive species is to actually eradicate them and immediately replant with native plants. So the natives can then take over again. So we are launching a native plants nursery, but also some of these plants are intentionally focused on water management, namely plants that are suitable for rain gardens, for example, to make a positive contribution to stormwater management. This is our most ambitious urban farm at the corner of Southern Avenue and East Capitol Street in Ward 7, one of the food desert neighborhoods here in the district. This is a 3-acre site that we were given the use of by the DC Housing Authority. And so we have an aquaponics system here, and this one actually supports plant growth not just in the greenhouse, but also through fertigation outside of the greenhouse. Next to the greenhouse, on the left-hand side of the screen, you see these raised bed gardens with little flags. Those are gardens that the neighborhood is leasing out for free. And in the first growing season, which was the growing season that is just now concluding, we brought in seedlings from the farm and gave people some choice of what they wanted to grow. So basil, tomatoes, peppers, hot peppers actually were some very popular choices. There is a playground area that you see on the bottom right of the screen. These are mini gardens in milk crates for children, and we hope that as the site becomes more established, that school classes from the neighborhood will utilize the site. We've already had some very strong involvement from a high school that's only 5 minutes walking distance from this site, Maya Angelou School. So their shop classes have actually built a classroom building for us on the site. We've launched a farmers market on Saturdays. So it's very much a work in progress, but it's a very exciting project that has been very well received. I'm actually missing a slide here. Let's see if it's somewhere else. No, not coming. Sorry about that. But we have another site in Ward 8 in the way southeast corner of Washington, D.C., another food desert neighborhood where the university also has a campus where we offer mostly classes from our community college and from our workforce development program. And there, too, we are building a hydroponics facility, an aquaponics facility, and some raised bed gardens in that neighborhood. At each site, we teach gardening to supplement your household income by growing some of your food, but we also offer certificate programs as, for example, hydroponics or aquaponics technician, certificate in urban agriculture, and entrepreneurship classes as well, so that folks who are interested in making this, you know, a commercial activity, an entrepreneurial activity, will be equipped to do so. I mentioned earlier our research farm. So our research farm is our testing center where we test new technology, but it also serves as a training hub. We may not have all the different kinds of technologies at display at each of our urban farms, but we definitely have all of them in operation at our research farms. So we have hydroponics, aquaponics out there, raised bed gardens, bio-intensive methods, ethnic crops, anything you might think of that can work in terms of urban agriculture. We do it out there. We also think of this farm as a market stabilizer, because we have no illusions about how difficult, how challenging it can be to launch a new business. And so, for example, you know, our aspiration is at the farm to grow many, many different varieties of crops, to sort of provide a little bit of a backup for our new urban food producers and food processors. We also have a smoking facility, fish processing out at the farm that we've built as a training center for the local food systems. And last but not least, you know, whatever overflow we have that doesn't go to the farmers markets or to the CSA, to the Community Supported Agriculture Program, we provide a lot of food for the local food banks. Most recently, we had our gleaning event, our annual gleaning event, the Saturday before Thanksgiving, so that we can then supplement the Thanksgiving baskets that the food banks offer with some fresh produce. So the urban food hubs really are a very comprehensive way of looking at the food system in an urban setting. And they invite assessment of the indirect and the induced benefit of a local food system. On the social and cultural benefit side, you might assess the health effects. Does it really make a positive impact on health? Does it change people's eating habits when they actually begin to grow their own food and become closer again to the food system? We have become very distant from our food system in urban settings. And they invite an assessment of the, you might say, environmental impact and ecosystem services, like the water management aspect, but also energy aspects and other health effects that really come from having urban neighborhoods that reintroduce green space and reintroduce more of a closeness to how nature works, and to demonstrate that even in an urban setting where the building density might be very high. So ultimately, you might say the urban food hubs really are a way of focusing on the triple bottom line, not just creating jobs in underserved neighborhoods, and really expanding commercially viable activities in urban settings, but also looking at the social, cultural, and the environmental impacts. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you all and ask you if you have any questions. But before I do that, I just wanted to share some pictures with you about our food hub areas. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very, very much, Professor Sabine O'Hara. That was extremely insightful and stimulating. I thought also your showing how you combine actually economic opportunity and improving health and improving quality of living, and then also just the impact you can have with the jobs, but also with the increased economic activity, especially in underserved areas. And I like it how you also pointed to that there are potential conflicts when you look at maximum return versus maximum utility for a neighborhood, when you pointed at that the expensive crops might crowd up the maybe cheaper but more basic crops. So that was very interesting, I thought. Now, I'm just the moderator, and we do already have a first question here, and I want to give the microphone to Alyssa Banks, who has a question to you.
Thank you.
Alyssa, your mic is open. You can ask your question if you want to. Okay, otherwise I can ask the question. So Alyssa asked whether or how are these efforts being coordinated and funded across DC? Is this primarily done through UDC, or are there other institutions involved in supporting the coordination, and how is this being funded? And she also says it's an amazing work.
Thank you. Yes, we are really sort of the hub of it all, if you might say. We are organized as a land-grant university into our academic division, where we offer nutrition, dietetics, health education, nursing, but also water resources management, urban agriculture, and urban sustainability at the master's level. And we have architecture as part of our college, which a lot of people are surprised by that. But it's really essential when you do work in urban agriculture. You really need to look at that design. On the land grant side, we have 5 centers. We have the Center for Urban Agriculture. That's where our master gardening, our urban ag certifications, and so forth are offered. The Center for Sustainable Development and Resilience, you might say that's the hub of the waste and water recovery activities, green infrastructure, green jobs. We have the Center for Nutrition, Diet, and Health, which is our largest, and that's where we offer our nutrition education in schools, but also for senior citizens, and then the value-added training. We have a Center for Architectural Innovation and Building Science. So again, this is a look at the green buildings, but also at the space between the buildings. How can that contribute to health? And then last but not least, we have a Center for 4-H and Youth Development. 4-H is typically better known in rural America, stands for the head, heart, hands, and health, sort of a leadership development program for young people. So the content areas from those 4 land-grant centers are reflected in our youth programming. We work a lot with nonprofits. So while we were the mastermind behind the Urban Food Hubs, we couldn't do this work without close collaboration with a lot of nonprofits, but also with district agencies. So we get support through grants that we compete for example, from the District Department of Energy and Environment. We're always short of funds. I'm sure this is not surprising to many of you who work in this urban ag space. So it's grant writing and also fundraising from private sector sources. So we've been pretty fortunate to get support both from the USDA, which is our land grant appropriation, but then, as I said, from district agencies and from private sector support that has enabled us to actually build these systems across the district. But as a university, you know, we felt strongly we're the only public university in the district. And the only land grant, and so we felt, you know, if you really want to make an impact in low income neighborhoods, you have to make an upfront investment. So you really have to be willing to put those capital, you know, to cover the capital expenses for these systems, so that the users then don't have to bear the burden of both the capital costs and the operating costs of these urban agriculture systems.
Thank you, Professor O'Hara. Thank you for clarifying this. And I think it's a very good point that you make that there is economic opportunity and benefits, but it needs upfront investment. Now for the question, or people asking questions or not knowing how to ask a question. So you have different ways of doing that. You can raise your hand, and then I can give you the microphone, but you can also type your questions in the questions box, and we can then get back to you. And while we wait for more questions to come in, we have a few questions for you to answer, please. So we have a first poll addressed to all the participants. It's a very simple question. It's not a test question. We know that some of you are in DC, but some aren't. So we're asking, do you have urban agriculture in your community? And you can answer yes, no, or don't know. And I give you a few more seconds to vote here. I see we have 70% have voted. And I give you, okay, I'm closing the poll now. We have the results are out. So 82% say they have urban agriculture in their community, and nobody said no. 18% said they don't know. So that's actually pretty impressive. Yeah. That shows how important urban agriculture is nowadays.
Yeah. Very impressive.
It is. It is. Maybe we have a very biased sample here in the participants, but it's very interesting. We can directly follow up this one. Or I see there is a question. So let me just go. So I will open the microphone, and Sonia, you can talk now, provided the microphone works.
Hi, yes, just a quick question in terms of the technology used in some of the urban gardens, temperature sensors, humidity, is that popular, or is it all done by traditional methods?
So it's a mix. We do a lot of traditional methods. The raised bed gardens use none of that. No temperature sensors, no moisture sensors, no nothing. At the farm too, it's limited, but when it comes to the hydroponics and aquaponics systems, then it becomes more high tech. So you have to test the water as it goes through the system, right? You know, the fish generate a lot of ammonia, the plants prefer nitrates, and then you want to make sure as it filters back that the nitrates are actually taken up. The same is true with the green roof. We have sensors there to make sure that the nutrient load is very low in our runoff, so we don't inadvertently contribute to eutrophication. So it depends, but you know, when it comes to a lot of the neighborhood gardens, we really teach very traditional methods, soil-based methods. We have agronomists on staff, soil scientists, and so forth. And because there is very limited knowledge in some of our neighborhoods, that's where we start. We also use a lot of biointensive methods. That means, you know, co-locating plants that support each other. Improve yield rather than growing everything in neat rows, which we've become accustomed to. But you know, the reason we plant that way nowadays is really mostly because of the machines. So we kind of go back to some more traditional methods of biointensive systems.
Sonia, does that answer your question sufficiently?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Perfect. Perfect.
Thank you.
So we have another follow-up question here from Alyssa Banks, who cannot, or whose microphone isn't working. So I'm going to ask the question instead. She's asking, she would like to learn more about how this works and how this is informing local food policy efforts. So is that a question, Alyssa, is that a question how to get involved with it, how to support this? Maybe that's how this is meant. And you can maybe say something about this, Sabine. How can people participate or contribute?
So, you know, we're pretty fortunate here in DC. We have a relatively recently established food policy council. It's actually, the chair is actually one of our celebrity chefs here in DC, Chef Mike Mendelson. And the Food Policy Council is supported by the District Department of Planning, but also Department of Energy and Environment, and DEMPAT, the Deputy Mayor's Office of Economic Development and Planning. DC launched about 5 years ago maybe an initiative that is called Sustainable DC. And in that Sustainable DC plan, the district set targets, such as by 2025, we want all of our rivers to be fishable and swimmable again. Now, this may be an ambitious target, but that's what it is, and that's what we're working toward. And likewise, there are targets in that Sustainable DC plan with respect to local food. So fresh food access needs to improve. I can't remember off the top of my head what some of these outcomes are, but for example, that there should be either a farmer's market or some access to fresh food in every neighborhood. Also, a related target that we focus on is literacy, food literacy and sustainability literacy. So this is where some of the early childhood education comes in and some of the work with the schools comes in. This is the effort to reintroduce children to our food system and to improve sustainability literacy as well as food systems literacy. I can certainly post a link if I can find it quickly enough to the Sustainable DC plan. So it's not entirely focused on food, but certainly food plays an important role in that plan. And that plan has really helped to then get the Food Policy Council established to try and get all the different stakeholders in a room. And it's a big and growing group of nonprofits and small businesses and so forth that are involved in this urban agriculture space and in this urban food system space. So I think your question is, you know, right on the money. There has to be a lot of work in terms of policy. So to give you just some examples, about 18 months or so ago now, the district passed a new ordinance. So beekeeping is now allowed in the District of Columbia. Previously, it was not. And also there's some, you know, encouragement of food production through different policy instruments, but also stormwater credits to mitigate water runoff. So this is a big, big agenda and an ongoing agenda, and it really requires our attention to see what do we need to do on the policy side, not only to remove barriers that right now would stand in the way of urban food systems and urban food production, but to actually encourage it and to actually use subsidies or use the tax law to increase and to really improve the conditions for successful businesses in the urban food space.
Perfect, because that was also part two, or the more accurate framing of Alyssa's question was actually really about policy barriers or issues that had to be done on the policy side. And I find it very interesting what you said about the beekeeping. But sometimes you also have restrictions on the use of recycled water, etc., etc. So I can imagine there's probably quite a bit of policies or adapting policies or removing policy barriers.
Absolutely. And, you know, one of the things that is very much a work in progress, I think there's been some very good progress in terms of just recognizing the role that urban agriculture can play, but it still is looked upon very much like a hobby. And so we really have a ways to go still in actually recognizing and encouraging the small business development aspects that the urban food space can offer.
Very good, very good. We do have another poll ready, prepared for the participants here. So this is another question to all of you. Are you an urban agriculture practitioner? And you can answer either yes, or you can answer no, or you can say no, but thinking about it. And I see 2/3 have already voted. I'll leave the poll open for another few seconds till we have maybe 3 more. Yeah? Okay, so I'm going to close the poll now. 77% have voted, and so this is now a different result. Of course, it's a little bit more personal. So Sabine, I hope you can see this as well. So we have 40% say they are actually urban agriculture practitioners already, 20% say no, and 40% say no, but thinking about it. I think that's extremely impressive.
Yeah, and I want to encourage those of you who are thinking about it, go online and check out Uptop Acres, for example. This is a group of 2 young men and 1 young woman who started a business here in the Stadium neighborhood in Washington, D.C. And they are growing food on roofs. These are repurposed roofs, although many were built as green roofs, so they support more weight than more conventional roofs. But they weren't necessarily built as food-producing green roofs. And so this business has taken over several roofs in the Stadium neighborhood and grows food for restaurants in that area. And they're seeking to expand, so they're actively seeking additional rooftops that would be suitable, that have the necessary weight-bearing load. But so there are all kinds of, opportunities in this space. What is also interesting is that sometimes you start out in food production, and a number of the entrepreneurs in the food production space then quickly add food processing, making pesto, for example, or events. And events are very popular, where you can actually have a catering business and hold lunches for the people on Capitol Hill, and here's where your salad grows, right? So I would encourage you, those of you who are sort of toying with the idea, to keep looking and to find your opportunity in this urban food space.
Okay, very, very good. So it's 12:53 here in DC, so we have just a few minutes left because we said we wanted to keep these webinars to strictly under 1 hour. But since you mentioned this, Sabine, I have a question to you. How did this all start, and how much time did it take to actually get to where it is today? And where is it going in the future?
Well, we've been on a fast track, Max. I have been here as Dean of the College of Agriculture, Urban Sustainability, and Environmental Sciences for going on 5 years now. And so when I first came and got my arms around what might it mean to be involved with agriculture and urban sustainability strictly in an urban environment, with the help of my fabulous staff, we cooked up this urban food hubs idea and the idea of focusing our research exclusively on urban systems. So everything I've just told you is 4 years old or less. And where are we going? Well, our ambition is to have at least one food hub in every one of the 8 wards of the District of Columbia. So right now we are in Ward 3, 5, 7, and 8, and are actively looking for space as well as for collaborators in the remaining wards.
Wow, very impressive, very ambitious, but also very impressive the speed the velocity of your enterprise. Really, really insightful. I hope that this will also be kind of spreading outside of the District of Columbia, and that your ideas will sprout elsewhere. I know that there's a whole lot of urban agriculture projects happening all over. We've seen it in all the cities that we've visited, be it in the colder climates, in Minneapolis, in Detroit, where you have whole blocks that are turned into agricultural land, or if you go south, in Memphis, in Houston, they're everywhere. And I think there's also a lot of learning that can happen between places. So I hope that we can continue the conversation after this webinar. Please feel free all to reach out to us over email, or join our LinkedIn news group, or join us, contact us on social media, on Facebook and on Twitter. I look forward to talking to you again in the new year. This was the last POCACITO webinar for 2016. I say, well, see you in 2017, and season's greetings, and take care, everybody. Thank you again, Sabine O'Hara, for this great webinar, and thank you everybody here on the webinar for joining us, for asking questions, and spending the day with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.